Teams are how we spend our work lives. They're how we get stuff done. But far too many of them are sick, broken, or dysfunctional. And that makes work miserable and less productive. Let's fix them. Let's make teams great to be on and amazingly productive.
You're sitting in a meeting. You know the one. The one that gives you a knot in the pit of your stomach just thinking about it. And maybe it's because you sit there getting nothing done, listening to people go on and on while you're thinking, what am I doing here? I got work to do. Or maybe it's because you're sitting there and that guy, that same guy who every time, oh, we've tried that before, that'll never work. And maybe you hate it because every time he gets your goat and you get angry. Or maybe you hate it because every time you let it slide and you're just really disappointed in yourself. Have you been in meetings like that? What does that worst meeting mean to you? Let's hear an example. What do you think of when you think of that meeting that gives you a knot in the pit of your stomach? Scratch my eyes out. Absolutely. Trying to avoid conflict, I think, is something incredibly common because we're nice people and we get put in situations that we're really not comfortable in. A few years ago now, I was sitting at my desk and the phone rang. It was the CEO of a small financial services organization, and I had recently sent him some material about the program at Knightsbridge we call team inoculation, and we lovingly call that the flu shot for teams. And he said something to me I'll never forget. He said, "Thanks for sending me the material on the flu shot. Do you have a rabies shot?" And I didn't know what he meant until the first time I went off-site with his team. And as I walked in the room, no one was making eye contact with one another. In fact, they'd barely look up to look at me before they put their heads back down again. This team wasn't just dysfunctional, this team was toxic. And it had begun to eat away at these people. Not only personally, though, it had also started to eat away at the company. They did an employee survey, having once been on the best employers list. And the question on the survey was, we have the leadership we need to make our organization successful. Not one employee agreed with that statement. Not one in the entire organization, including the members of the executive team themselves. And it was no surprise that sales and revenue had been declining for 3 years straight. Have you ever been sitting in a meeting thinking, I can't afford to be here. We can't afford to spend this much time in meetings? Have you ever been with your team and tried to get your point across and just felt misunderstood and why doesn't she get it? And have you ever walked through the door on a Friday night and had all the stress of that team, of that week, come out when you kind of bark at your family as you walk in the door? For the sake of our productivity, for the sake of our sanity, we have got to do better. Take yourself to your computer at your desk. It's Monday morning at 10:45 and you're having a great morning. Just finishing off the first latte and you've got 3 things checked off your to-do list. It's going great. And all of a sudden, as you're working, that little box pops up in the bottom of your screen that you have a new message. And I want you to imagine that that message comes from the one person on your team who just rubs you the wrong way. You just don't quite trust them. And here's what the message says. I've reviewed your presentation. I found a couple of errors. I have some ideas for how to make it better. I'll see you at 3 o'clock. How do you feel? Scared, yeah, sorry. Defensive, tense, yeah. Frustrated, absolutely. I agree. I think you're feeling all of those things. Now shake your head like an Etch-a-Sketch, forget about that person, and I want you to think about the person on your team who just always has your back. Someone just your go-to person. You walk out of meetings together just to kind of calibrate. How'd you think that went? Get that person in your head. Now, 10:45, same desk, same screen, same email. I got your presentation. I found a couple of errors. I've thought of some ways to make it better. I'll see you at 3 o'clock. How do you feel now? Great. Excited? Thankful. Why thankful? They found the mistakes. Whew. Good thing the boss didn't see those. What is that? Animal brain. I call it the mother-in-law effect, right? Something your mom could say to you and it'd be fine. When your mother-in-law says it, no, not so good, right? And that's the assumptions that we walk around our organizations with. That's what we walk around our teams with. And we are done if we cannot start with a positive assumption.
We have to bring our full value.
What do you need from your environment to be at your best?
You've got to bring all of yourself, your past experience, your knowledge, maybe even your personality, your style. You've got to bring all of that to your team. There's an old cliche that there's no I in team. Well, I'm here to tell you, there is a you in team. Here's the 5 things you can do to make your team more effective. Number 1, you've got to start with a positive assumption, and we don't do that. Think of a time when that little email alert has flashed up in the bottom of your computer screen. It only takes 5 or 6 words if it's from someone you don't like or you don't respect before your back is up and you get all defensive. Ironically, if you got that exact same email from somebody you do like, you probably could have got good value out of it. Whatever that baggage is, it's time to unpack it. You've got to start with a positive assumption. Number 2, you've got to add your full value. We all show up that way on our first day of work, but somehow over time we take our foot off the gas or maybe we just give up. You can't do that. And you also can't just live by the words on your job description. You've got to add more than your technical value. You've got to bring all of yourself, your past experience, your knowledge, maybe even your personality, your style. Maybe you're really detail-oriented, or maybe you get the customer better than anyone else. You've got to bring all of that to your team. Add your full value. Number 3, you've got to amplify other voices. Teams get thrown together for all sorts of reasons. What tends to happen is you end up with a majority and then also a minority. And those minority voices tend to get drowned out. You can't let that happen. You've got to lend them your credibility, your voice, maybe even your spot on the agenda. You need to make sure that you amplify other voices. Number 4, you've got to know when to say no. From the time we're just little, we learn a good team player says yes, but sometimes that's not the case. There's too many priorities and too little alignment on today's teams. You've got to figure out what you need to say no to. Know when to say no. Number 5, probably the hardest, you've got to embrace productive conflict. I know, conflict when it's personal or has an agenda feels terrible, but conflict that's focused on the business issue, that's what drives innovation and that's what helps us to manage risk. Conflict is absolutely essential to a healthy team, so you've got to embrace productive conflict. So maybe there's no I in team, but there is a you in team. You have a responsibility not only to add your full value, but to make sure others can add theirs too. Not only will you do a better job of listening, but you'll also create the chance to have a better conversation and understand things more fully. It'll even improve your relationships along the way. When you change the value you bring, you'll change your team.